Katie Porter, thank you so much for making time for us.
I'm excited to be in conversation.
This is a hard job at a really hard time. Why do you want to be California governor now?
Because California has to change direction, or we're not going to be able to offer the same bright future for this next generation of Californians. We've been heading in one direction for a long time on cost of living, and we need someone who's willing to push at the status quo in Sacramento, but also who understands what's coming at us at the federal level and has a track record of standing up to Trump. But no amount of standing up to Trump is going to bring down the cost of living by itself in California. My whole career has been about affordability, and so that's California's biggest challenge, particularly housing affordability, and that's exactly what my background and experiences are in.
In terms of, should you be elected governor, speaking of the direction the state has been going in, California is at an inflection point where our state leaders have spent more money than has been brought in, and now whoever becomes governor will have to decide how to grapple with that, whether that's cutting state programs or increasing taxes. What do you see a Governor Katie Porter doing?
Yeah, I think the answer has to be both. You have to be willing to look at areas where you're spending and make sure they're effective. If you're not willing to do that, you shouldn't be governor. You have to be accountable to taxpayers. I think that's really important. And Democrats need to do that too. We can't allow Republicans to own this issue of accountability. When I ran here in Orange County, I had signs that said taxpayer advocate, and Republicans lost their mind because they're not used to hearing that from Democrats. But I have a track record on oversight. I served on the Oversight Committee, really holding government programs to account. And I think that's a big contrast from the other leaders in this race. At the same time, we do need more revenue, and part of that is just the economy changing. What it means to be wealthy has changed, where the tippy top is, right? So we have our first trillionaire, right, in Elon Musk. We have, we're spending a lot of time in our tax code right now, for example, dividing between families making $40,000 and families making $80,000. And you know what those families have in common? They're struggling to make ends meet in California, but we're not doing enough to think about what is the right way to tax the top, including how to think about the incredible wealth that's going to come from AI and making sure that is shared with Californians.
Is taxing the top how you would try to pay for some of the state programs?
Yeah, so look, I have a track record of being willing to say that, to speak truth to power, to go toe-to-toe with the wealthy and the powerful, whether that's corporations or individuals. So I wouldn't hesitate to look at the top tax bracket and to think about it. But we also have to, and this is what makes me different than the other Democrats in this race. I'm the only Democrat in this race talking about giving tax relief to California families. Look, life here is unaffordable, and the question is, what are you willing to do about it? And what I'm willing to do about it is to say to Californians earning less than $100,000, keep at what you earn. Say that California shouldn't be taking a cut out of that because it's hard enough to make ends meet here on $100,000. How would I make up that difference? First off, it's about $8 billion in a budget, as you know, that is over $320 billion. But also, I would make it up by having a progressive corporate tax. So families get this. They know that if you get a second job and maybe you trip up into the next income bracket, you pay a little bit higher rate. But corporations, that's not true. When you go from making $1 a profit as a corporation in California to making $500 million in profit or $1 billion in profit, you pay the same 8.84%. So if we were to tip that corporate rate, like instead of being flat, if we were to tip it just a little, make this top rate 9.5%, this is something some other states have done, by the way. Not only could we pay to eliminate state taxes on people making under $100,000, we could also provide 2 free years at our UCs and CSUs, which combined with our community college would be a free college degree. Something no other state is offering, a competitive advantage for California, a reason to move here, a reason to stay here. But we would actually have enough money left over to begin to provide a little bit of tax relief for businesses that are barely eking on. So we could move that 8.84 to maybe 6 or 7. And so that's my revenue plan. It's detailed, it's comprehensive, and the math works.
Business groups might look at that and say, well, it costs a lot of money to do business in California.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm taxing profits, because its profits are after your expenses. So it does cost money to do business in California, and I'm not punishing one industry or another like we've seen some candidates do. I'm not going after big versus small. What I'm saying is you sell things, you put things out there, you get revenue in, you have to pay your expenses. That includes your employees, that includes compliance costs. You know, these costs are high in California, to your point. After that, what you have left is profits. That's what we're taxing. So one of the things businesses could do in California if they don't want to pay tax on this slightly higher tax on profits, is they could pay their employees more. They could grow their business. They could expand. They could create new jobs. And they would have less profit. All of those things, by the way, are also good for California's economy and generate more revenue. So I'm really proud of this tax plan. I think it's thoughtful, and I think it avoids some of the negative downsides of some other revenue plans that we've heard about in this race.
One of the state's biggest expenses is health care. Right now, California provides health insurance to low-income, undocumented immigrants, about more than 1 million of them at this point. There is no ability for new adults to join this program. There's talks of increasing the premium right now for it. What would you do with this program should you become governor?
Yeah. The problem with our Medi-Cal program is that it needs to be less expensive to provide the care. We have wanted to add people to it, which I support. I think everyone should have health care and insurance coverage. Not the same thing as care, as anybody knows who's ever tried to use their insurance, but health insurance and Medi-Cal is part of that. But we have to drive down costs in Medi-Cal if we're going to try to cover more people. And that's especially true where we have a terrible partner on healthcare, which is what Donald Trump has been. This could mean things like leveraging more of the efficiencies with CalRx. It took a long time to get CalRx going, but it is going now. So let's look at making some of those more drugs that we can manufacture here, make them cheaper. We really need to think about how to make healthcare more affordable. We can't just keep letting it go up at the same rate it's been going up at, because it will ultimately prevent us from offering coverage. And people who don't have health care don't not get sick. They don't drive safer. They don't have fewer heart attacks or strokes. Where they're going to wind up somewhere, and where they often wind up is in our emergency rooms. We've learned this lesson in California. It was expensive and it was painful. So having health care for everybody is really important, but we cannot allow, you have to be willing to stand up to those who are driving up healthcare costs. And I have done that with a whiteboard. I went at it with a pharmacy CEO, and I exposed how the drug had gone up 7 or 8 times in price, but the manufacturing cost, the research behind it, the marketing costs, none of that had gone up 1 penny. As I said then, all that had happened was the pharmaceutical company had gotten better at making money. And so I have a track record of not just kind of keeping the lights on with regard to healthcare, but actually pushing to make it affordable to cover everyone.
And so would you be in favor of a single payer healthcare system, essentially, is what you're...
So I've long advocated for single payer. I ran on it here in Orange County. And I think that surprised some people, given that this was a very purple area. But look, Medicare delivers the best quality care, the most patient satisfaction, the biggest network of doctors to choose from at the lowest cost. That is exactly what we ought to be aiming for with healthcare. Now, I think with Trump in office, it's pretty clear that the traditional path to CalCare, to California having its own single payer, we're not going to get cooperation from Donald Trump on this. What we're getting on healthcare is things like the reality that 25% of our hospitals might close under the HR 1, Trump's big bill. So I think this does present, though, we're not going to have that federal partnership, but it does, and these questions about Medi-Cal do maybe force us to say, what can we do at the state level to capture efficiencies? And the answer is single payer, because look, single payer at the federal level, they spend $2 out of every $100 on healthcare, on insurance claims, on administration, on paperwork. Private insurance, $17 or $18. That's a lot of healthcare money that we need to capture.
But how long do you think that if you become governor, you could implement something like that, just given the state being plagued by inefficiencies with mega programs?
No, you absolutely have to make sure you have your sea legs under you, that you understand, do you have not only the right programs, the right personnel, do you have the right partnership? I will say that a lot in the business community tell me they're tired. They feel like they're in the business of selling whatever they make, let's just say widgets, and they're also in the business of healthcare, because healthcare cost is eating up so much of what they pay. You'll hear the same thing from labor unions. When they're negotiating, the fights that we've seen, some of the strikes we've seen, they're not just about pay, they're also about the higher cost of healthcare. So I do think there is a world in which both labor and business could come together and benefit from cheaper healthcare, just better quality care at a lower price point. That's a win-win for every side.
You mentioned labor unions. Right now, another big expense for the state is how much it spends on public education. The labor unions have had these, CTA specifically, statewide strikes over teacher pay, but at the same time, we're seeing these classroom performance issues with California students struggling to do basic, reading, math, science. How would you manage that situation as governor?
So thinking about the role of the state in this, because this is a state and local partnership, thinking about the role of the state, one of the things I would really focus on is what are these thresholds, these doors, that if they close on a student, they can never get back through. So if you're not reading fluently by age 7 or 8, the chances that you ever read really well are very, very, very low. I think the state ought to put a lot of accountability on making sure every kid possible gets through that gate. Same thing on the jump from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. I'm a public school parent, and I've had these conversations with my children about their Algebra 1 grade. If you don't make that jump from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2, a huge number of careers in healthcare, in science, in building trades jobs even become closed to you. So we have, as you know, the local control funding formula. I think it is time trying to give schools that have higher need kids more money. We've had that long enough now that it's time to go back and ask, do we have that right? Are we seeing the improvements? And I think I'm open to seeing that maybe we didn't give enough money to schools that have a high need population. Maybe we're not getting results and we are giving money, but that's what I would start evaluating. And I would really put a premium on what are these jumps. We've also seen recent reporting that, and I'm a professor at UC Irvine, that some of our kids arrive on the campuses at our CSUs, our Cal Polys and our UCs, not ready to do college level work. That is also an education accountability issue.
Okay. There is a national conversation about government waste, fraud, and abuse, as some might say. Yes. How would you, I know you touched on this a bit, but what would you do to tackle that issue?
Yeah, so look, I drive a minivan, and the license plate is OVRSITE. Spells out oversight. And I couldn't believe when I contacted the California DMV to fill this out that somebody didn't already have this license plate. But I think this speaks to the need to do that work. And you don't need to do it it really is about helping government succeed. It's not about pointing the finger at some other area of government or somebody from another party. This is an area where Republicans and Democrats should be able to work together. As governor, if somebody's coming to me wanting to add to a program, it is exactly right to ask the legislature, how do we know this program is working? What metrics did you look at? And one of the things I've heard from the legislators I've talked to is some of the current administration, past administrations, they're not always willing to testify in the Capitol. They're not always willing to provide that information about accountability.
You would?
I would. I think that's incredibly important. If there is a weakness and a problem within what the governor's administration is doing, that is the job of the governor. You cannot fix a problem that you will not see, that you will not admit exists. The Legislative Analyst's Office sounds geeky, but the LAO, as you know, they produce lots of reports pointing to where is government falling short? Where could government do better? And they get ignored every year. As a taxpayer, as a mom, this makes me nuts. When I say to clean something up, I mean it, and I chase that kid right up the steps to make sure that room gets picked up. It should be the same in our level. So Congress is a complicated place, as you know, and I served there for 6 years, but one thing we did do at the federal level is if our equivalent, the GAO, if they put out a report, we took that seriously. And I think that level of accountability needs to change in California, and I think Democrats should lead the charge in changing it.
On this note, there's also some advice flowing in from multiple directions about California's climate goals. Mm-hmm. Should California rethink some of these benchmarks?
Yeah, so look, the destination remains the same. We need to be green energy. We need to have clean energy. That is the cheaper energy source. And by the way, energy demand is expected to grow 50 to 100%, so doubling or more in the next couple of years. So we need more energy, and green energy is the path to getting there. But look, we don't have the same partner in the White House that we had. I was in Congress and voted for the Inflation Reduction Act. I voted for these projects, many of which were slated to come to California, offshore wind, for example, solar. We don't have the same partner. That does mean that we're going to have to adjust the intermediate benchmarks, but I don't think we ought to be moving backwards. I don't think we ought to be doubling down on a form of energy and sources of energy that make Californians sick, particularly low-income Californians, and that ultimately, and I think we've seen this with the Iran war, are subject to a lot of price shocks and a lot of challenges. So I think building green energy faster is really important for California. And I talk to green energy advocates, and a lot of times when I say, how are you? And they say, well, I'm in Texas, I'm in Wyoming, I'm in Utah. What are you doing there? Building green energy. That needs to change for Californians.
But I mean, the most immediate deadline coming up, 2035, for the sale of new gas-powered cars. Is that something that would be in place under Governor Katie Porter?
Yeah, so I don't think we're on a pathway to get to that deadline, but I don't want to give up on the goal. I want to think about what is the reasonable extension and really talk with car dealers and consumers about why are we not there. And I will just tell you, as someone whose minivan is kind of on its last legs, I went to look for cars, and I'll tell you, I said, this is a nice car. I like this one. What does it cost to get it as a hybrid? What does it cost to get it as an electric vehicle? $8,000 or $10,000 more. That's not money that I felt like I could spend or should spend. So that piece of it, we're losing those subsidies for electric vehicles. California is going to have to make some choices. If we want to prioritize the growth of electric vehicles, then we're going to have to put some money behind it on subsidies. We can't ask consumers to bear all that cost.
And so, I mean, with those subsidies, single payer, some of the also tax cuts, how really could you see yourself paying for all of this?
Yeah, so the single payer, the tax cuts and the free tuition, I already told you the plan for that. Single payer is going to be a shared project. It is going to come from a combination of payroll tax and a business tax, because business pays a lot of the health insurance premiums right now. You ask employers, they're paying $1,000 a month sometimes in contributions per employee. So that's a different project. I would say things like the energy subsidies, we're going to have to make some priority choices. We cannot have everything. So I think there's a hard conversation to have with every single group and a hard look to take at what programs give us the most bang for the buck. But we know that transportation is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas. And we know that having more electrification, having more battery storage, all of these things will ultimately drive down costs. We are investing in transit is important, but we are always going to have a large number of Californians, tens of millions of Californians who are probably going to commute to work.
Another huge issue in the state is homelessness, as you know. How will you help people feel like their streets and sidewalks are actually cleared, that they don't feel what they're feeling right now in every city in the state?
Yep. So one of the things I've been talking about since I got into this race was homelessness prevention, and I'm glad to hear other candidates starting to talk about this. It is really important to invest in programs that keep people from losing their home. It's often a downward spiral. Very few people go from an apartment directly to the street. It's often shared housing, it's doubling up, it's living in a car, it's living in a motel. Keeping people where they are is very, very inexpensive compared to the cost of permanent supportive housing. One of the reasons I think people feel like we haven't made progress is we have housed that person that you saw 6 months ago, but there's somebody new taking its place. You can't solve a problem if the problem is continuing to get worse. So I would switch more of our dollars to being focused on prevention. I also think interim housing is very, very important. I think this is something that we're hearing widespread agreement from the governor's candidates on, that we have to prevent people from getting on the street. A lot of the folks that people see on the street are very challenging to help. They often have multiple things going on, sometimes no close family relationships, mental health issues, physical health issues, substance use issues. We're seeing exactly how expensive it is to provide housing as well as services for those people. That is not sustainable. We have to help people. We don't want to have permanent homelessness. We want to have interim homelessness, short-term homelessness, the threat of homelessness that didn't come real because we invested in prevention.
In 2024, with an election, some under this Proposition 36 proposal linked homelessness and crime in that measure to increase penalties for repeat drug dealers and thieves. Just taking a step back on crime broadly, California's in a situation right now where it's trying to, manage this court order to reduce its prison populations, but also there are Californians who feel like criminals aren't being held accountable. How would you manage that as governor?
Yeah, so I think the answer is to really look at what does justice look like? And for me, justice has two touchstones. One, do we make the victim whole, right? And that can be very hard, if not impossible to do, right? Especially in the most horrific crimes. You can never completely repair that, but there are things we can do, right? So thinking about paying for services for the victim, that is really, really important. The second piece of this is, does whatever punishment we're giving, whatever correction we're using, whether that's incarceration, whether that's a diversion court, does it change the behavior? That is the goal. It's not about locking people up for the sake of locking people up. It's locking people up sometimes because they're not capable in that moment of changing their behavior. One of the things that's happening that I know you've looked at is how much California's prison population is aging. We now have a lot of people in their 60s and 70s and even 80s in our prison. The recidivism rates for older prisoners are very, very low. And so that's a population that we might be able to release and be confident that their behavior would not repeat itself. At the same time, we are still going to have criminals and we are still going to need prisons. That is not going away. Everybody deserves to be safe in their community.
On the elder population, there's a debate at the state capitol over whether 55 is elderly.
That's a data question.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that is really a great example of what does the data tell us. And my guess is, having done some looking at this, that the correct age may vary with the kind of crime. So there may be some kinds of crime where the rate of recidivism is incredibly high all the way through end of life. That's a sad story, but it is true for some crimes. There are other crimes, particularly we know a lot of kinds of violent crime, that, let's face it, when testosterone drops for men, so do the tendencies toward physical violence. And so that might be the right age for that. But that's probably going to be crime by crime, first off, and then also, of course, inmate by inmate, looking at each incarcerated individual and doing some thinking. But we do have to have these questions.
How will you represent all Californians who are not Democrats in this state?
Yeah, I love this question. So first, look, I've actually represented Democrats and Republicans in large number. My district in Orange County was about equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans, and I'm unique in the candidates that way. Javier Becerra, deep blue area, won a very safe seat, stayed in it for 25 years. Tom Steyer hasn't represented anybody yet. I have a track record of standing on my own 2 feet and representing a community like Huntington Beach, where the high school mascot is the Oilers, and at the same time representing a community like Laguna Beach, which has never seen a whale they didn't want to save. And so I have had to balance that and do that. And one of the things that I think let me do that successfully was my willingness to answer questions and to be really honest. I am willing to say sometimes Democrats fall short. If you're not willing to say that, you're not aiming high enough, because you're not aiming for Democrats to do better. That's something Democrats ourselves should be holding ourselves accountable. The other thing I'll point to is, look, the no income tax on families earning less than $100,000, letting you keep more of your paycheck if you're struggling to make ends meet. You know where I got that idea? Steve Hilton. Now, I disagree with Steve on many, many, many things. But I heard him say that and I thought, you know what? When kids graduating from university, do we need to?
Nope. Just keep on going. Just keep going.
Yeah.
We only have 2 left, so
Yeah.
it's all good. Okay.
Like Steve Hilton, kids graduating from universities, they're not earning very much and they're struggling to make ends meet. So they're getting their degree here and they're leaving. And I thought, I don't care where the idea came from. A good idea is a good idea. And we deserve a governor who prioritizes good ideas, not political favors.
I want to ask you about this temperament question you keep getting First, just, I mean, what has been your reaction to this, the campaign trail focusing a lot on one of your interviews with another journalist, with this video? I've just, you getting, that question constantly, just what have you made of that?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not the first time that we've seen women candidates asked about temperament. It's a word that also gets used for, show dogs and racehorses. It's not one that ever gets used for male candidates. And so I think temperament does matter. I think personality matters. I think leadership style matters. I think intelligence matters. It's fine to ask about it. I just think it's a good question to put to everyone. Everybody in California had a chance to see me on the debate stage with the journalist. And I will tell you, I think when you look at those debates, which as you know can be high pressure situations, I showed that I was cool and calm under pressure. But I also, unlike some others who were cool and calm, the difference is I answered the questions. And I think that is the right kind of temperament to have to be governor.
You have this ad with the lightheartedness around the video of your interaction with a staffer. I mean, my question to you is, how did that video even get out into the public eye?
Yeah, so that video was a Zoom that I did with the Department of Energy, with Secretary Granholm, and that video, the Zoom recording, is property of the Department of Energy, and it's to be used only for Department of Energy federal government purposes. And Tom Steyer's staffer, Kevin Lau, had access to that video because he was Jennifer Granholm's staffer. And so he was on Steyer's payroll when that video was released to the public, and a week later, 2 weeks later, Tom Steyer declared for governor. So look, things are fair in politics, tough hits come, but you shouldn't break ethical rules and steal government property and use it for personal or political gain. You should follow the ethical rules that we have. I think that's a minimum qualification for our next governor. And by the way, I just want to say one more thing. The important thing about that video is that it was 5 years ago, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that I apologized 5 years ago to that staffer, and we kept working together for 4 years after that. So this isn't about, the staffer in the video is not the one who feels the need to be vindicated here, because I made it right in the moment. This was about a billionaire feeling the need to punch down at the only viable woman in order to make space for his billions to win the race.
Yeah, you're the only woman in the race, and what has that been like?
Yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, I'm definitely the only one who spends a lot of time thinking about what shoes I'm going to wear. I'm definitely the only one that I think feels really sad when I learn that hair will not be provided. I mean, Steve Hilton has no hair, so that's I think easiest for him, he'll tell you. But look, I think we've seen, and I think people have seen this in their families, and there's actually research behind this. When times are tough, when stakes are really high, whether that's a family member dealing with a mental illness, whether that's can't pay all the bills, you know who figures it out? Moms. And so I think I will put my track record as a mom. If there's one set of people that I could have vouch for me in this race, it would be my kids, because they are amazing Californians, and I am in this race not for the past, but for the future.
Okay. What grade would you give Governor Gavin Newsom for his last 2 terms?
Are you sitting in your chair firmly? Because unlike every other Democrat, I'm going to give a grade. I watched everybody else bob and weave.
Thank you.
So I would give him an A-.
Okay.
That is a pretty high grade. I will give you that. I think there have been a lot of things that have come at him. There is work undone, to be sure. But that's always true. Part of the job of a governor is to try to solve things. You're not going to solve them all. He did not solve housing cost. We are not in a better housing production state. But he highlighted that issue, which gave me a lot of time to think about it, to learn about it, and to come up with the best housing plan in this race. Okay. And I can say 2 things that Gavin Newsom did that made my life better. Okay. Free school lunches. Okay. Put $300 a month back in my pocket. That really helped as a mom. And free community college. My middle child, if he doesn't get that science grade up, math grade up, that's right where he's going, and I'm proud of him for it. But free community college changes my whole ability to save for retirement, to maybe replace that minivan. So I think people are looking for this from our next governor. What can you actually do in our lives to make it better?
Okay. My last one for you. What are 3 words you would use to describe California under Governor Katie Porter?
Yeah, innovative. We have to break the status quo. It isn't taking us to the right place. Efficient. We should all expect that from government. Democrats need to own the issue of efficiency and uncorruptible. I am the only candidate in this race that does not take corporate contributions. I have been willing to stand up to labor, to corporations, to all kinds of special interests in my entire career and in this race. And I think Californians deserve confidence that their governor works only for them.
All right. Katie Porter, thank you so much for making time for
Thank
us.
you.